Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this third and, well, actually fourth day and the last day of the Global Conference for Space for Emerging Countries, Glec 2022. And today we will continue our exciting program to discuss and highlight other important aspects connected to the establishment and consolidation of the space sector in emerging countries. For those who were at the gala dinner yesterday, I hope you have relaxed and I hope you have enjoyed it. We did very much. But without further ado, I would like to remind you still that you also, as usually, have the opportunity to interact with our speakers through our Slido system using either the app or directly the link to Slido, and you see here the instruction on the screen. So this first plenary of today will focus on space industry development and support, and we will first hear a keynote by John Roth, Vice President, Business Development, Sierra Space, and the panel will be moderated by Matthias Campos, founder and CEO of Cidernauta Space Technologies. So let's start with John. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much an honor to be here and given an opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes before the panel starts. And we're going to be talking about space industry development and support. And I think that's really a key element of the future ecosystem. We've been talking a lot about space agencies and what space agencies want to do in the future and cooperation between space agencies. But if you take a look at what's really going to happen in the future, I think it's going to be the commercialization of space that is really going to drive development. We are going to see a new era in space that we have not seen before, and it is because of the commercial companies that are really starting to engage in space. It used to be really the purview of just international agencies, and it's not any longer. I just saw in the news this morning that SpaceX is doing its 21st launch of the year. And 14 of those launches have just been to launch their own commercial internet satellites into space. And there's so much activity going on right now. I want to talk about one of the elements of the future ecosystem, and that is a destination in low Earth orbit, because that's going to be so key, I think, to the future in having a economy in space. So I want to first talk about the International Space Station. It is an amazing engineering feat. A lot of people have said it's probably the greatest engineering accomplishment that's ever been done, to be able to create a station in low Earth orbit where people could live and work. And it has been continuously occupied for more than 20 years. It's kind of amazing what we've accomplished. It took more than 40 launches to launch the ISS. Some people have said it took over $100 billion to pay for it. So it's certainly not something that everybody can take on and do. But what I'm going to talk about is what's going to happen in the future, and what is going to replace the International Space Station, and how is that going to help drive the commercial economy forward. So the bad news about the ISS. It really has been limited to a handful of countries. There were 5 partners that signed the International Governmental Agreement back in 1998. The US, Russia, Japan, Canada, and ESA. So it's really been majority operated by those countries. And I'm sure a lot of the countries here have had some access to the ISS, being able to put some payloads on, but in terms of really utilizing the ISS and getting the full value out of what has been found out in R&D in terms of microgravity and materials science and all the things that they've been able to discover on the ISS, it's really been a little bit closed to most of the countries. The other thing about ISS is it really was designed to support space agency research and development. It was never really set up to be anything to really support commercial industry. In the last few years, there's been an attempt to move it to a platform that could be used for commercialization. In the U.S., we set up the ISS National Laboratory, and we have access to the laboratory for commercial companies right now. But it's really been very small amounts of commercial business that has been done on the ISS. But even with those, there's been some extraordinary results. We have found things in science that cannot be done on Earth, cannot be duplicated on Earth. And it gives the promise for a lot of commercial businesses that potentially could be developed in low Earth orbit. It's really a marvel of technology, but it's not suited to commercial utilization right now. So what's going to change going forward? NASA announced a few years ago that they did not intend to build a new International Space Station. They were going to leave low Earth orbit to commercial entities, and their hope was there would be a few crazy companies like ours that said, yeah, we're going to invest a few $1 billion and we're going to put up a commercial space station in low Earth orbit because we do believe there is going to be a commercial economy of the future. And so right now there are 4 teams participating with NASA in public-private partnerships. NASA is not funding the build of space stations. All they're doing is paying for insight into what the commercial companies are doing to build their space stations. So NASA is a partner with us. We finished a system requirements review recently. We're going to be doing a system design review later. They're doing that with all 4 companies. So NASA wants to know, what are the commercial companies doing? What are their capabilities going to be? And at the same time, they want to provide what their requirements are to us so that we can make sure that what we develop is going to support what NASA wants to do in the future. But this is going to be a tremendous opportunity, because this is not limited to NASA or to any other space agency right now. It is going to be a commercial platform. Access to that platform will be through commercial companies. It's going to be a business. It's not going to be run by the space agency. We actually have no requirement to provide any space to NASA on our space station. Their contract does not say they get any portion of that space station. My goal would be that we lease the entire space station before we even launch it, and NASA has to come back later and say, gee, why didn't we get a bunch of that space station allocation? So it's going to be very different. Countries that have really never had access to a platform in low Earth orbit where they can not only do research and development, but their commercial companies can look at products that they could develop in space, they're going to have the opportunity to do that. And we want to start the process now of reaching out to countries that have never really utilized a platform in space. They're not sure what to do with it, how to do research, what kind of commercial businesses might be opportunities. So it gives us time right now to start that process, which is really why I wanted to make this presentation at this conference, was to give everybody a glimpse into the future of commercial space and a commercial destination. So what are we doing? I'll just talk a little bit about Orbital Reef. Orbital Reef is a partnership between Sierra Space and Blue Origin, and we are developing the commercial space station. It's just one example. There are 4 companies, and I will almost guarantee you there will be more than one destination in space. A few of the companies were focusing on a little bit different business models and different customer sets. So it's not just going to be us up there, but I can guarantee you that we will have Orbital Reef on orbit. And the reason I can guarantee that is our company has raised $1.4 billion already towards development of this space station. Blue Origin has Jeff Bezos that is perfectly able to write checks for their portion of the space station. So between us, we're fully funded to go develop this space station. So this is going to be a reality. It's not something that we're just hoping is going to happen. And I want the countries that are here to understand what's going to be going on in low Earth orbit. And our vision really is commercial based. We talk about being a mixed-use business park. So this is not an R&D facility for space agencies. This is something where companies who have ideas for businesses they want to do in space. And it could be things they do on Orbital Reef. It could be biopharm production, medicines and vaccinations. It could be materials development. It could be developing new lubricants that you can't develop on Earth. There are a whole number of applications that you can do. But it also can be to support businesses like debris removal, satellite servicing, satellite refueling. Any activity that goes on in space can take advantage of having a platform in space. Because the most difficult part and the most expensive part right now is launching from Earth to get to space. So instead of launching every single mission when you want to go to space, if you have a platform that you can utilize and you can get refueling on that platform and you can get resources, then it's going to be a tremendous opportunity for commercial businesses to grow. We also are going to host private astronauts. There's already been a couple of missions now that have been done, one free-flying mission, one mission to ISS. That's going to be a growing area. And it's not just billionaire tourists that are going to go to space. When you have companies like a biomanufacturing company that wants to develop a drug, they want their scientists to go to orbit. They don't want to train astronauts on how to do drug development. They want to do it themselves. And we're going to make that possible. Commercial companies will be able to go to space to do their manufacturing, to do their research and development, and space agencies as well. We're certainly going to open up the field of astronauts. We will do astronaut training. We'll provide the transportation system with our Dream Chaser vehicle. It's going to be a turnkey operation to be able to get people to space. And we see the prices dropping dramatically. When we start talking about very frequent access to low Earth orbit, if we're talking about weekly flights potentially in 10 years, 15 years, the prices are going to drop dramatically, and businesses and countries that don't have huge budgets will be able to have an astronaut program. So we want everybody to start thinking about that in the future. The next 5, 10 years, it's going to be a very different landscape than it is right now. And yes, we want the international community to be involved. I've been flying all over the world for the last 2 years, meeting with various space agencies, talking about what we're trying to do. We've signed MOUs with more than 30 companies around the world, and the idea is to start that dialogue. What is our space station going to look like? How do you access it? What are the interfaces? As we find out about the business concepts that people have, what businesses do they want to operate in space? How can we support that business? How can we design our platform specifically to help their business grow? So that's really what we're all about right now, is outreach and communication, and we certainly welcome having discussions with everybody going forward. And yes, there are commercial businesses. We get that question a lot. So what's making you invest all this money in a commercial space station? Do you really think there's going to be a market? I spent more than a year working with a team of folks that were looking at the markets and trying to define the size of the markets and when those markets are going to happen. And we convinced ourselves, and we were able to convince our investors that there is a market there. The investors we had come into our company are not space people. They are pure equity investors that are really smart about making good business decisions, and they elected to put $1.4 billion into this endeavor. So we've been able to convince pretty smart folks that there is a market there. And finally, I want to just mention, so there's an opportunity for all countries to participate in this future of space and be part of a commercial economy going forward. And my call is to action, that really we have to start planning now. You don't want to wait 8 years, 6 years, 5 years, and then say, hey, this sounds interesting. I wonder what they're going to be doing in space commercially, because there's going to be other folks that are running faster than that. And you really want to start thinking about, in your future plans, when you're doing your 10-year vision plan, how does commercial space fit into that? How does a commercial destination fit into that? Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, John, for that keynote speech. I was going to tell you what this panel was going to be about, but John's introduction pretty much just explained how it's going to be rolling. This is space industry development and support. And of course, on Monday during the entrepreneurship workshop, we had the New Space Latin American panel, where we had CEOs of the young and upcoming companies from the region, where we shared what we are doing and how we look to collaborate with each other. Now, we have a panel that includes emerging companies, but also established space players, and we are going to be discussing how that change of paradigm from traditional space, where, as you know, space agencies had a more concrete role, is evolving into new space. And just as John showed us, I already know that Carlos might be interested about using that platform soon. So it'd be interesting to see how Costa Rica and, of course, Ecuador can be part of that project, the reef. So, of course, to start, of course, remember that we have the Slido up. So the idea for this panel is to have a discussion. Also, on Tuesday, we had the panel on industry moderated by Clay. We thought that was pretty lively, so and an active discussion. So we think about just continuing that train of thought, maybe focused a little more on how emerging countries can be supported in their development of their industry, and also how the established space players can support. Okay, and also how perhaps Carlos and I'm the moderator, but I'll try to contribute as well some of the emerging country perspective. How do we maybe expect to see you supporting us? With what John described, there's a lot we can start going through, but I wanted to ask each of our panelists to give a short statement of what have they done, what they are doing, or what would they do with emerging countries, so that we have the table set for the discussion, and we can go back and forth between Carlos and me and all of you. And of course the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to add them in the slide, and let's keep this lively. So please, James, if you would like to begin.
Well, I don't really think it's fair to follow John's presentation. I mean, I'm sorry, it just isn't fair. That was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. The last 2 or 3 days, the scope of what we've been talking about is gigantic, it's infinite. And I'm a relatively simple person, so I have to reduce it down to a size that I can work with. And so at CWSP, we're a consulting and services firm. We've broken it into 3 simple areas: how things get into space, what happens to them once they're in space, and what happens when they come down from space. And each of those have different risk profiles, financial investment, and number of players within it. And I'm not making a judgment about what's the best one to be in at all. But what we have started to focus on within CWSP is just 2 areas: getting into space and from space. Now, within the getting into space component, we've created, through a prior life, an organization called the Global Spaceport Alliance, which is a network of spaceports around the world. Our chairman is George Neild, who's the former chair of FAA Commercial Space. George is a fantastic guy. He just got back from his maiden flight on Blue Origin up into space, and he's very good at talking about all the details of that particular trip. But I think that as we look at our vision for the GSA, the words global and network are the things to really focus on. Yesterday somebody said, Greg Ortry, I believe, don't think too much regionally. Think about the commercial space environment as a global enterprise. And I think the partnerships, et cetera, that are involved in that become crucial. Now, just to lay the groundwork for that, we have some 26 members already within the Global Spaceport Alliance. And we have representation from all the continents, not Africa yet, but I'm talking to the Kenyan Space Agency, and hopefully we'll have them shortly. So we'll have full representation from everybody. And all these spaceports are at different stages of development. Some of them don't have launch at all, some of them have vertical, some of them are working on horizontal, some of them are working on balloons. I mean, there's an array of different types of launch. But all of them are also considering what kinds of clusters could be created around them that are non-launch related revenues. Okay, when John was talking about the business development park, I was struck by that because, in effect, that's essentially what a spaceport wants to become and what orbital reef can become up in space. So it's a nice marriage to that effort. So that's the get into space part of what we try to talk about and what we work on. In terms of from space, CWSP, we do not try to emphasize comms or navigation. We strictly focus in on Earth observation capabilities, okay? And what we try to do is, under the overall circumstances going on, there's a lot of activity there. So we help people navigate the maze of suppliers that are out there providing data on the one side against an innumerable number of applications, and the number of applications is just staggering. You know, I was in Quito in November. We were at the Ecuador Open for Business meeting in November. We're here today. We've met with all the ministries here talking about how EO can be applied to specific problems that they have. The list of service companies is just staggering. I mean, how do I make an investment and make sure it's effective? And frankly, there's so much data out there that it's actually useless unless you have analytics applied against it that can make statistical information available to the people making decisions. And the hardest part of it is building an infrastructure to make that happen. And here's our contact information. So the quick introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just following the two speakers, and I have to thank John for fantastic presentation. And I mean, I work for Thales Alenia Space, and we are not as lucky as John working in US, where the possibility also to have financed number of activities by far lower than that. So our attitude has been different. We're just trying to join John in his enterprise. And actually, our ambition is to be part of the orbital reef. However, I guess the goal, as it was mentioned of this panel, is also to see and to give some advice or some matter for discussion on the way we could really cooperate among industrial partners and, let's say, new industries, new entities coming into space. So what it will be discussed later on is, in my view, there is not really one model that is working everywhere and for every domain. So we see that from our experience, which is the reason I'm here, there are different ways of working depending on the domain we're talking about. If we're talking about telecommunication, if we're talking about Earth observation, if we're talking about science, exploration, and in-orbit servicing, or whatever other activities in space. As you know, Thales Alenia Space is working on all domains except on the launcher domain, and we desperately need to launch things, and so a step forward should be done there. So in my view, there are different ways of collaboration that needs to be tailored to a basic demand from the emerging country. What is the goal that every single country wants to obtain? And that's the basic question. I mean, we don't need to do space just because space is nice. It is actually, but nevertheless, the goal is to define a plan. We've been working with countries that at the beginning, they've started asking for nearly everything in the fields I just mentioned before. And then we've seen them concentrating on the real goal, on their real end objective. John mentioned some of those which are exceptional. I mean, research, fundamental research in medicine, in pharmacology, in microgravity are perfect. There are many, many, many others that needs to be exploited. And for me, the first activity that should be, say, shared among us is the is the goal of the activity that everybody wants to have. I guess that we will follow in the discussion with some more examples.
Thank you, Vincenzo, for the call to action and collaboration. Henrik, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Buenos dias and good morning. I'm from Swedish Space Corporation, or SSC, and just to clear up one bit of confusion that often comes up, we are not our government agency. That is the Swedish National Space Agency. And in Sweden, they are fully administrative. We are an operational corporation. We have a base, our S-Range Space Center in northern Sweden, where we've been doing payload development for scientists and suborbital flights since the 60s, and since the 70s, we've been flying stratospheric balloons there as well. And we also have one of the world's largest networks of ground stations. So I just want to start here after John's presentation, and seen some presentations yesterday about a permanent moon settlement, that this is a really exciting time to be in space. This is fun. I think we're all fortunate to be working at this time. And we've seen a huge shift recently from, like John said before, the space programs were run by agencies, were run by the big institutions. Now we have the commercial companies coming in and sometimes even running fully commercially. So why is this? The first reason is the access to space has gotten much more affordable. Technology has gotten cheaper, the satellites have gotten much cheaper, even the launch prices have gotten cheaper, so there's less risk to get into space. The second one, I think, is private money coming in. I think John can say, with private money coming into Sierra Space, what a difference that made and how that really accelerated the evolution of what they do. And then the third one, I want to point to the US again, how NASA switched their paradigm from procuring full products to procuring services instead. So you had to find a commercial solution as well, and I think this is just a catalyst for innovation for the industry. So this has been fantastic. And in Europe, we've also seen this change, the change from an institutional to a commercial market, and it's something that we're taking, that we're trying to be part of, and it's a change for us as well. At SSC, we've long depended on institutional money. A lot of the work we do is in support of scientists, and that's usually institutional. But now we're seeing the emergence of new space companies in Europe, lots of launch vehicles coming out of Europe. So we're making a change as well. One of our changes a few years ago, we opened a rocket test bed that is now in use full-time by several European launch companies. And much like Christian mentioned yesterday with our colleagues just to the west, we are expanding our spaceport to do orbital launches starting next year. So in 2023, we'll have satellites being launched from Sweden and from Norway. That'll be exciting. So circle back to the focus of this week, looking at what the benefits are to emerging space nations of this change. I think the first one is very natural and great for everybody in the space industry. It's the emergence of a whole new pool of potential partners and potential customers coming from the whole world. So one good example here is Orbital Space Technologies. Carlos and his company are flying a payload on our next suborbital microgravity mission. It's our first payload from Costa Rica. We're very excited to have them. And it's flying on a rocket with a motor from Brazil. So it's a lot of fun to see this interaction. But I think the partnerships will become more and more important, and we have more partners that we can utilize now in different areas. So I think that's a big key to going forward. And then the other key, I think, is kind of leveling the playing field now. We see so many new space nations emerging, and I think a big part is the access to space has become much more affordable, and being able to reap the benefits to society of that access now is going to be able to reach the rest of the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Henrik. It is indeed an exciting time to be working in space. I've been thinking maybe if we have, like maybe Carlos and I were born maybe 10 years ago, like we wouldn't be able to be here and like collaborate with you because our traditional space was not the way for our countries, but new space is. So leading into that, Carlos.
Thank you. 1 second. From the perspective of an emerging country, there's a lot of things that do make sense in other parts of the world, but don't really make sense in here. So, for example, if you want to go and do a launching company, it makes sense if you're in a part of the world where you have access to those kinds of resources. But from here, to go and duke it out with SpaceX and all the plethora of different companies that have emerged, it doesn't really make sense. So what we proposed from our end, or what really did make sense for us, was that we could start focusing on niche applications, something that's really that we already have the capabilities of doing in our countries. And it can be something from, for example, in Costa Rica, we have really good bio labs and world-class biologists. So that's a no-brainer for us, focusing in biotech. that's one thing that we can do. In the equator, for example, you already have the advantage of being on the equator line, and that makes sense for launching capabilities, things like that. So what we try to do is focus on that, and I think venture capital money and funding, everyone always talks about funding, and that's great, but I don't think that's necessary. What I really think that makes a difference are success stories. So if you get one success story, everyone starts thinking about it, everyone starts thinking they can do it. And once you get success stories, everyone just tries to make their own ideas, and those ideas are what bring the funding, right? If you have a great idea, the funding will come eventually. It doesn't matter where it's from. So the thing we've done with SSC and the way we think developed nations can help emerging nations in the space field is to help giving them the space to have a success story, right? To help collaborate in something that maybe is niche and they need help with, that we can collaborate, and then we can, through cooperation, make the space field sector grow in Latin America and emerging countries in general.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Luigi?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I guess we got a lot of extremely interesting ideas being thrown out by the panel so far. And myself, I'm a little bit an intruder here because I'm not from the industry, but from a consulting company. Even so, from my point of view, from my perspective, I've been able to work with both governments as well as with established industry players, and also with new space companies, even in extremely niche fields, applications, or in more, let's say, exotic domains, like indeed in orbit economy or space exploration. So from that, we draw like a number of, let's say, conclusions about what it means to grow a sustainable industrial base in a country. We have also worked a bit on analyzing specifically the topic of emerging countries. So we did in the past an analysis of different emerging space players. Note that I'm talking about emerging space countries rather than emerging countries per se, just by looking at what were the dynamics in place for the creation of a sustainable industry. And I just want to reattach to some of the points that were made by the other speakers. So on one side, John has rightly pointed out that there is a nascent commercial space market. That's definitely for sure. I mean, we see more and more commercial space activities. But I guess it's also important to point out that commercial space doesn't necessarily mean commercial demand. So there can be commercial space where companies take risk, develop assets, and deliver services. But there might, and there actually is also a lot of dependence on institutional demand still. So this means that companies that want to approach a given market will have to take that into account and consider that institutional demand might still be a part of the picture, and institutional demand might be strongly regionally captive, so not available in the particular region where the company is operating. So this is an aspect to take into account. This means that basically a given company that wants to sort of grow sustainably in a new country will have to look at its strategy with a broader view and connect with the institutions. Make sure that what they want to do is more or less in line with some country objectives and so on, and gain some sort of support. Of course, this is true in general. Then there are different cases where you have indeed a bright idea and you get access to funding or markets here and there. But in general, if you want to sustainably stay in that country, there needs to be some sort of action in that sense, because another risk is that you do something, you become successful, and someone else comes and buy you up and moves you to the US or Europe or wherever else, and so there is no real growth of an ecosystem in the country. I know yesterday they told me I shouldn't use the word ecosystem, but it's pretty appropriate in this case. So I think in general, while it is true that also as Vincenzo said, each domain is very different, so you might have very different dynamics at play, very different needs and and opportunities. It's true that some basic tenets might still be derived. And one is be extremely focused in what you want to do. As you were saying, as you were rightly saying, it's good to focus and have an idea, have a strategy, and focus on that with some sort of strategic sense, because otherwise you end up in a red ocean of competition that will just suffocate you. And second, try to build the relationship with the ecosystem you are in, because otherwise you're going to be a bubble and you will either implode or you will be moved somewhere else, as we've seen with many excellent companies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Luigi. I agree completely. Like the support we can get as emerging nations in guiding us with that strategic planning and that strategic growth of our companies, it's fundamental in us, as Carlos was saying, becoming that success story. Thank you. Peter?
Yes, it's always not easy, let's say, to be the last one in a row, because let's say all the things have already been said. But there's one thing which has not been said. That's where I would like to start with. Let's say what an excellent evening this was yesterday. Really wonderful. The other thing, let's say, which has been addressed is, of course, let's say the new space. Let's say in particular, let's say the space for in the LEO and on the cislunar economy. But we are here in an emerging country, in an emerging region, and that's why you would have to talk, also about the things which are important for this particular part of the world. And there, money plays a big role, and especially, let's say, that if you talk about cooperation, let's say, then it is very important if you've got limited funds. So what I've done is, let's say, to make a little comparison. If I understand, let's say, all the figures correctly, the total budget of, let's say, Latin American space agencies is about 500 million euros for 650 million people. This is 2%, let's say the money is 2% of the NASA budget, and it's 6% of the ESA budget. So you've got a huge population and you've got very limited funds, which means that you would have to cooperate with other agencies. And fortunately, let's say a lot of Latin American and Central American countries have already established cooperation agreements with France, with Italy, with China, with the US. So there is plenty of examples. But what I think is also very important for a continent like Latin America is the possibility of Earth observation. And as James has indicated, let's say the opportunities are unlimited, let's say, for a continent like this. And secondly, also, what I think which is very important, how to interpret the data, because there's such an enormous wealth of data coming out of the Earth observation satellites, which can be extremely useful for a continent like Latin America. Let's say that's how to make the best use of this data, so that it's also a stimulus for economic growth. And the few points have been mentioned, like the agriculture and the natural resource management and the emergency response, organized crime detection, and the infrastructure. There are unlimited possibilities, but you need to know how to interpret the data and how to make this work for you. So I believe, let's say, that in order to have the support for a region like this, it is very important that this is that the possibilities for these new technologies which are made available with Earth observation data is used to the maximum extent. And in that respect, the European Union has started a global action plan for space, promoting the use of the flagship programs of the European Union, being the Copernicus and the Galileo data. And in that program, let's say, they are willing to support the emerging countries. It's about making a maximum use of the data by giving them business coaching, by giving them training on the use of the data. And in that respect, I've talked already to a few people here in the room, and let's say if anybody wants to have further information on this, let's say by all means. But, I'm very, very pleased to support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and you're completely right. Sometimes as emerging countries and emerging space companies, we don't really look for money, and we're like, can you please write us a check? can you please send some money, please? Like, we need it. No, we are like, these are capabilities. How can we support you? And how can you support us? And I think it's been a great outcome of this conference, at least for Astalintu, and hopefully it's inspiring for other entrepreneurs. And I would like to also, if someone would like to share what they think, on Tuesday we signed the commercial agreement with the Orbit. And our relationship began with us just meeting and saying, this is what we want to do, and they said, like, this is what we do. And then, of course, we were not like, as I said before, we don't need your money. We need, like, to work with you. Let's see what we can do together to provide space logistics in Latin America. And of course, that evolved into us integrating our first ground station into the Aurora platform that the Orbit manages. And then that led, that first project, that first trust in our capabilities as an emerging country allowed for something more to develop. So the Orbit also saw benefit in working with us, as well as we were benefiting from getting their support. So, and now we're very proud to be representing and also representing the Orbit services here in Latin America, because that is what we maybe need, that trust, that help, that business development, so that's coaching, as Peter was mentioning, in that, yes, of course money would help as well, but yeah, but if you come here, if you're here in Quito, if you're here in Glec, it's good to talk to us to see what we can do together, how we can find something we can benefit from both sides. So that is my take on how we should go ahead with space industry and development support, is how we can benefit both sides, because new space is leveraging the playing field, and we want to get quick to you. So Sergio Sacocha was saying at the opening ceremony that the churches are quite new, and he found them nicer. So perhaps our companies will be nicer than the big companies right now at some point. Hopefully, no, I'm kidding. I really hope that we are at the same level and we can bring space to everybody. So with that said, I don't know if anybody would like to elaborate on.
Yeah, okay. I would like to start from what Carlos just said before, because that's the right input for me. First, he talked about niches. I would like just to elaborate a little bit that. Niches means that, first of all, you have a need as a country. And if we just take the example of Latin America, you have thousands of kilometers of coasts that need to be controlled from a security point of view, from pollution, water pollution point of view, and things like that. So there is a need, there is a niche, but as it was said by James before, you need also to have the capability downstream to elaborate data that Peter said are available, because we have Copernicus satellite as an example, but many of NASA. So starting from a need, you elaborate the niche downstream, then you go back and then you create your own sensors to be flown with the help of some of the big industries which are here. And then that's a good part, actually. And what's the advantage? The advantage for us is to have a larger supply chain for sensors, for everything we can buy around. And we are always in competition, US against Europe. In Europe, we have strong competition in those kind of services. And that's a win-win story. However, there is a consideration, and my message is especially to the agencies. We also need activity that bring us people being inspired. And when I say people, I say young people, I say students. If you notice, all the big country operating in space, they have a solid university, they have solid research centers. So no one is inventing just because they want to do something. So you need to start from the student, you need to inspire the student. And that's I come to the exploration word. There is nothing more inspiring than exploration. And the presentation of John was just an example. We were all looking at it. And so you need to inspire people. And I would like that next conference here, apart from all of you, but I would like to see hundreds of students being here and listening to us, because those are the guys that will build the future. I mean, I'm talking just for myself, we are already too old for that. We need the young people, and you need to inspire, and to inspire them, you inspire them with exploration, space exploration, moon exploration, Mars exploration, astrophysics, all these kind of things. And when you have a solid university background, then for sure everything becomes natural.
Can I just add something to that? I think you're absolutely right. Inspiration is the key, but the problem there is it takes a generation to get that going. But it's an investment you have to make now for the long-term results. I completely agree with everything that's been said here about how we can help some of these emerging space nations and things we can do with them, and like flying smaller payloads to get a start. But one thing I don't want to forget, a lot of these companies, like Orbital Space Technologies here, are providing a service and coming up with a great company that could be a supplier to Sierra Space, could be a supplier to you at Thales. And while a lot of the work we do, we're talking about helping, I think there's a lot of just natural, we need more suppliers. We need, for an ecosystem, they benefit from biodiversity. This is biodiversity. So if you come with a good product, it's not because we're trying to help, but I think naturally we will work together, and that will help build the industry as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with all those points. As Luigi was saying, there's something that it's key, and you have to build upon the capabilities you have on your country and make it stay so that you can truly develop, right? So, for example, what we did was like Costa Rica's main exportation product is banana, okay? So we export more medical devices, but as a single product is banana. So we already have world-class scientists that know about banana. What our train of thought was that, okay, we found a problem that focused on banana, which is the Panama disease. So when you go to someone that doesn't understand space in our countries, and you go and tell them in terms that they can understand, like, okay, you have this problem. This disease causes several million or $billion in losses every year. Solving this issue or the experimentation is high risk. It might work, it might not. But if you solve it, you stand to gain this much, and this possible solution costs this much. That's really easy. Everyone can understand that. And that's the way forward. We do that with bio research because that's what we're strong at. But there's countries in Latin America that are good at mining, for example. Maybe they have better insights that could help develop the industry and help with other big companies that have a need for those kinds of services, right? And also about education, I completely agree. What we've done is we've seen people in these kinds of regions are starving to get into these kinds of fields like space and STEM, but they just don't believe they can. When we started, I co-founded when I was in college a student group for aerospace, and at first we were 6. We had a success story. As I told you, we went to the IAC and presented some papers. Okay, next year there were 200. That year we went and won at the UNICEF's Mission Idea Contest. Next year, 500 students. And they're starving for doing space, and they work with what they got, and they have great ideas, and that's how the ecosystem grows. Right now, I believe Costa Rica is one of the most capable countries in the Latin American region in space because of the plethora of students, the sheer number of students are researching on it and interested in it, and it might show in a few years, maybe not right now. But that's kind of how you start to develop the ecosystem, as we were talking about, to support these kinds of endeavors in the region.
Yeah, if I could just, okay? Just to riff a little bit on what was just said there, I think find something that is a pain point in your industry. Showcase how that pain point can be resolved as a result of using satellite systems of one kind or another. Demonstrate clearly a return on investment to the community of stakeholders, and you have a win. Now, the next step, though, is the most crucial one. You have to promote that win to the community broadly, not just to us. We need to outreach beyond into the industry and really make it effective and impactful. That's
Yeah, no, maybe just wanted to add, I thought this was an extremely important point. I mean, here we are talking about specifically the downstream, and that's quite clear. In the end, it is something that we also observed, that indeed in emerging space countries, there is more attention to this problem of demand pull versus technology push, as opposed to established space regions where you typically say, like a lot of super advanced analytics, a lot of availability of data, but still a little bit of a detachment vis-a-vis the end users in many cases. While, in emerging space countries, there is this need, to go indeed straight to the end user, and this creates this beneficial process. And honestly, I think this is also like a very nice dynamic to have, to start from the downstream, which is less capital intensive, and build your way upstream by then going to the sensors and possibly, who knows, to platforms and systems as well. So I thought this was extremely well thought out.
There has been a study ongoing on the impact of the space clusters. And space clusters, let's say 8 space clusters around the world. And let's say there were Luxembourg, Colorado, Toulouse, Bremen, Adelaide, Cape Town, S-Range, and the space cluster in the Mojave Desert. Now, 6 of these space clusters have seen enormous growth after an organization of an event like this. After the IACs. If you take a look what's going on now in southern Australia, after the IAC was held over there, and other countries. So it is the creation of awareness, let's say, to the general public, and in particular to the youth. And that's why I think it's very important, let's say, to have these type of events being organized. And okay, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Peter. As the host organization, Cidernauta Foundation you've seen me with the Astralin 2 tag, but I'm also the STEM program director and as we see students coming in. So Vincenzo, your wishes came true.
Yes. Yeah. Let's say for everybody in the audience, if you look behind you, it's...
Trust me, I did not know.
Yeah. I thank you very much, Matthias, let's say, to have arranged this so quickly. It's very
good. No, they were waiting till Vincenzo called them.
Your reaction is unbelievable. It's
Call to action. You see, that's an example of what we can do if we collaborate.
Yeah, that's how we do things, yeah.
So, I wanted to share, and now also, this is very relevant to maybe the students here, us as the host organization, the Cidernauta Foundation, and I'm the STEM program director. I study engineering. I'm also a teacher, so I love working at the foundation. And Peter just mentioned, organizing events like this one is very, very important for Ecuador. You might not notice it, but this event is generating tremendous momentum on what's the development of space in this country. And of course, for us, collaboration is key. Becoming suppliers and collaborating between each other. For example, with Carlos, we were talking yesterday. They're sending this payload to Sweden with SSC, and saying hey, what can we do for you? And we were chatting, and perfect, let's do that together, and things like that. And also with education, with the foundation, we realized that. So we were offering this. We still offer. It's an open call for a subvention access to space, but there were not very many applications, so for the students, keep an eye out for the open call if you have a payload that wants to be sent to space. But we said this is like a building, and perhaps we're asking people to be at the third floor before building the ground floor. So the foundation decided, and of course, as Henrik mentioned, you have a whole generation to waste, or not waste, but to invest on until that capabilities happen. So the Cidernauta Foundation took the decision to target in parallel several of the floors in this metaphor of using a building. And in this first floor is children. And the Cidernauta Foundation is hosting this space summer camp that is not, it was never envisioned to be an Ecuadorian summer camp, but actually a regional summer camp. It's called the Cidernauta Summer Camp. I invite everyone to go to cidernautas.com. It's only in Spanish, but it's very beautiful. The brand was designed by our very talented Daniela Mera, the vice president. And you see there with support of other companies how you can build the ecosystem at all levels in parallel. So yeah, so it's very important, and I see that legacy being left behind here in Glec, that there's things we can do together. We can be suppliers, but we just need that trust. Okay, we need the trust that you showed by coming to Ecuador this week. That trust in that there's things we can do, the trust that SSC has with Carlos, the trust that the orbit placed on Astralinto, the trust the new space actors are placing within each other. If we trust each other, I think we can bring up space and include all these students along. So yeah, any comments?
May I just jump on that for a second? When we formed the Global Spaceport Alliance, you had a whole bunch of spaceports, all with their unique business plans, all thinking they had the secret sauce, and they didn't want to share it with anybody. In the last 5 years, we now have 26 members, all of whom get together and share what's going on. And the trust that you're referring to is something that builds over time, that we can talk about what's happening. But if you don't bring people together to do it from disparate areas or disparate regions or disparate business types, it isn't going to happen. So things like Glec are really important in that regard.
Yeah, I guess James is right. I mean, we've been talking of business cases, on needs, users. One additional thing that we should consider is the fact that we have to talk with the end users. We shall not forget them. This was the way we were working decades ago. We were going to the people saying, that's what you need, which is not any longer the case. Now the question is, what do you need? And I have a very simple examples. We went into some of the best wine producers in Italy. French will forgive me, but I consider Barolo and Amarone the best wines in the world. And we told, yeah, there is a German saying that Riesling could be better. Yes, I know, Peter, okay, I only partly agree. No, but actually, and we went discussing with them, and we were trying to figure out all what they needed. At the end, we realized that what they needed was what now is being called as precision farming, which is very important for area region like this one. And one of the very specific case, they were having problem with the insect in the vineyard. And you know, in Italy, they used to put roses. And when the roses, which is the first to be attacked, is having problem, then they have to take some measure with chemical product. We say, listen, we can measure the color of the leaves well in advance with satellite, and you will not need to use chemical products. And now this is being used. And we have a major program in the European Space Agency dealing with that, but also the use of data. So this is just an example, but it is a fact that you need to talk with those people. You need to understand exactly what they want, and then you build the actual configuration that respond to these demands. It's not any longer the case that we say, listen, I have an observation, fantastic, 30 centimeter, 40 centimeter, and then you realize at the end that they don't need the resolution, they need a SWOT. So it's something, and this requires a lot of effort, because you will not find people so available to come to you knowing that they may spend some money in addition to what they spend. So you have to create it, and I tell you, I mean, Italy space is quite common. in Italy. However, we have difficulties in just calling into big congress all the users, wherever they are from.
Yeah, you can, sorry to interject, but I completely agree with your point. You can imagine like going to a banana corporation in Costa Rica and telling them, okay, what you need is space, right? It's just way up above their heads. They have never thought about it. So, but if you get with something that specifically applies to what they're doing, and they really understand the need for what you can offer up to them, if they really know that it could make a real impact, that's when you've got a winner, because it doesn't matter, they'll invest. They'll invest because it solves their problem, and that's kind of the way to do things. Talking about the trust that Matthias was also mentioning, I think it's really important because it generates a shift of mind in the whole society. For example, in Costa Rica we have Leo Labs now, and at first they just trusted that this was the best place to build their radar, but it generated discussion among politicians, among the general public. And now it's not as hard, and I think the next space company that sees a success, the success that Leo Labs has in Costa Rica, won't be as afraid to go in there, and it will be easier for them because people will already be accustomed to having these kinds of conversations. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to take up on this point because I think it's extremely valid indeed, and I totally agree. In the end, if we stay in the downstream side of the value chain, and particularly in space data exploitation, we have seen in the past all the models of one-stop shop platforms fail, right? I mean, everybody has tried to have the ecosystem to serve everyone with space data, and nobody has succeeded. Exactly because you need to be very, very specific, understand the user needs, and this requires extreme specialization down the value chain. So this on one side creates opportunities for small companies, because clearly, I mean, the Airbus of the situation, I mean, they cannot be specialized in every single type of things down to the extreme level of specialization that is required. So on one side, this creates opportunities for small companies. On the other side, the challenge for the small company is to then grow into something more and not get stuck into a single specialization over there, because then, of course, the margin are a little bit limited. So it's an opportunity and another point to take into account for small companies. Yeah.
Peter, please.
Yep. I want to get up on what Carlos just has said. Let's say that if you go to the banana producer in Costa Rica and you talk about space, that he will say, what are you talking about? But I believe, let's say, one should go to this banana producer. One should try to get somebody, let's say, who has got an open mind and to see what can be the benefits of space. So that's why this is also important, let's say, on this EU plan for the promotion of Copernicus and Galileo, let's say, to go to the users and to demonstrate what can be done. And I think that's very important. So one should not give up, because once you talk to this farmer in Costa Rica, and he uses this data, his competitor next door is also saying, "My God, there are much more bananas grown from my neighbor than from myself." So he also wants to use this data, and then you've got this accelerator. So I think that's enormously important.
If I just might say, I've had the opportunity to meet with the president of Ray-Ban PAC and talk to him specifically, Vicente, about how the banana industry in Ecuador could take advantage of Earth observation capability, and he's all in. So, to your point.
Thank you, everyone. As we're coming to our close, and I just want to thank all the students for their presence here today. I hope you enjoyed this panel, and the rest of the day is going to be full of very interesting talks. And of course, here we have a question from our very own Bal Munsami, which was the former VP for emerging countries and the IPC co-chair of this conference. So I just want to point out before before the question, just if you could also, while answering the question, say how events like Glec, like being organized in countries like Ecuador, in regions like Latin America, create a legacy. for students, for new space companies, and builds that momentum that we mentioned earlier. And now that so that's the special focus that I want you to keep in mind. And then Val's question, for sake of time, I'm kind of mixing them. Val's question is if, and with all the students here, is the industry willing to host students to build a real life experience and stimulating the future of space workforce? So in Tuesday's panel, I was saying that failure for us is not an option. Like, I meant complete failure. Like, of course we can still make small mistakes, but a small mistake is very costly. And I think what Val points out here is that if the big companies allow us to come work with you and be able to make small mistakes that maybe are not that terrible that they don't get us bankrupt, but allow us then here with the students to build together that ecosystem with working with you or with conferences like Glec.
I'll just say one of the things that we're doing on Orbital Reef is we're starting an incubator program. And we're looking long term. We're not looking at a year or 2 years. So we have the advantage of trying to help companies and around the world, and we want to make this a global enterprise, help them figure out what can they do in space and how could they participate with us on Orbital Reef. Are there things that they could provide us as a vendor? Are there partnerships that we could do? Could we help train them in a certain area that we think is going to be a good business area? And so we've set aside some of the money that we've raised specifically to help incubate companies, and especially startups from non-U.S. locations.
Fantastic, yes.
Yeah, I mean, youth is the future, let's face it. Depending upon what you want to accomplish with your country or with your industry depends on what kind of workforce you want to develop and what kind of things you want to emphasize. Obviously, we want to emphasize STEM-related activities. I think each of us have a responsibility to go out to the local high schools, go out to the local universities, and make a pitch and talk to them about what is going on in space and how that can be used to their advantage. As each of you find success stories within the application of space to an industry or to yourselves, you should promote that and get that out to the community as much as possible. You know, I was fortunate enough to operate under a Space Act agreement with NASA to create an event in Houston called SpaceCom. And it was basically focused on how the terrestrial industries and people benefit from our space activities. And we built in student-related activities, entrepreneurial-related activities, international activities, and the result of that is just fantastic. And the type of things like Glec are exactly that type of model and need to be emulated a lot. So kudos to the Glec organization.
Thank you.
So very shortly, first we all have to thank Glec for what they did here. I mean, at least from a company perspective, it opens a window to us, and which is fantastic. The only thing we didn't have the possibility to do was a sort of B2B on a single basis, because of course time is what it is. But again, of course, we need this kind of events to make us also knowing what is happening in every region. To answer your second question, yes, we are, as a company, often opening academia, regional academia, on the southeast of Asia. We have an academia in Singapore, we have an academia, we are making some of them. Of course, it does not start from scratch. I mean, when we realize that there is a system that wants to work, there is a system that wants to fund activity in space, then the reaction from a company is it's our advantage. Again, it's not because we are doing it for fun, it's because it's our financial advantage of the company to have academias in new region, and actually we don't have any here.
Yeah, it'd be great to see one over here. Yes. Henrik, or
Yeah.
Luigi.
Well, so on the Glec and the role of events like these, I could not be more supportive. So I think they have a tremendous impact in raising the awareness on space and space activities. So I think the IAF and the events organized around the world always have had a huge impact on the countries that have hosted them. So very supportive on that. And on the issue of internship support and other stuff like this, I mean, of course, we are a consulting company, so it's a little bit different than for the industry. But we do have, of course, internship programs, and we very gladly take on students that, in some cases, then become afterwards our colleagues or carry on with their plans or whatever. And we also have, scale-up support programs for startups. We have mentorship programs for entrepreneurs. So there's a whole bunch of activities that we carry out to support in different ways, students and entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Luigi. Peter, Carlos, any last? Henrik.
Mentioned before the importance of events like this. But we've got here a huge crowd, and let's say these are all users of space. There are students, let's say, who may be interested in following STEM education, but there's also people from the municipalities, from the government, who will explore the possibilities of space. We see people from the defense, enormous possibilities. So I think that the greatest awareness with a conference like this, I think I can only say bravo.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, on the same topic, I've seen firsthand the impact these kinds of conferences have. I think you all here will live with a sense of what space is for those who didn't know before, what can be done, and what the capabilities in the region are and the possibilities. So that's really important. I know that back home, it really, an event such as this organized by the UN really made an impact in our whole society. And it's what's been driving from that moment on the little things we have been doing to make sure we can stand on the same stage as you guys in the future. So that's really important as well. And regarding the internship topic, it's really important for us to be able to go and work and do these kinds of things with big companies that already know, so that we can learn how to do them. Because doing it by trial and error, as Matthias I'm sure can attest, it's kind of a long process. It's a doable one, and one we are happy to do, but it could exponentially help us bring more value, added value to your companies and to you, your countries, if we were able to learn directly from you. And I think that's great for pushing development in emerging space countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. So we ran out of time. I think this was a great panel. Thank you very much, everyone, and the audience for such a lively discussion. As a closing message, I just wanted to say that on purpose of all the students here, when I was, well, your age, not that long ago, actually. Yes. Yeah, when they were your age, perhaps. But when I was in university, let's put it that way, there was no space in Ecuador. None. I've talked to several colleagues of mine that have studied engineering and science, and they always tell me there's nowhere we can return to. Why do I return? And a lot of my peers stayed in abroad. I took looking back at it, I think it was maybe a little crazy, maybe a little brave, but I took the decision to coming back, and I want to tell the students that are here right now that space is here. Industry and development support is happening. You have the global leaders in space from the whole world here in Quito, in Ecuador. They came here to talk to us because space is something that will happen, is happening, and is here to stay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Matthias. I think these were really great closing words, and a big thanks to the panelists. This was my favorite question, and thanks, Matthias, for asking it, because it's so reassuring for the IEF that conferences like Glec, bringing the worldwide community in space to countries that are just starting to develop their ecosystem, is really reassuring for us that we are doing the right thing. So thank you very much. And once again, please get in front for a nice group picture.
Just one comment on what Christian just said. I just want to thank the IAF for the trust that we mentioned during the panel. The IAF has been the organization that has trusted Cidernauta and Astralinto the most with all this, like working with the 11th Secretariat that you see running around during IACs, like working with them the whole 6 months prior to Glec was like one of the best experiences. And yeah, thank you very much to all the IAF Secretariat.
Thank you, Matthias. So while we're finishing this group picture, I would like, without further ado, already ask the panelists of our next session to come forward. And as soon as the stage is free, take their seats, because we'll continue without break.